Shalom and welcome to another edition of Parsha Talk. I'm Rabbi Elliot Malamed in Highland Park at the Highland Park Conservative Temple Congregation on Shemet. Joining me are my good friends, Rabbi Jeremy Kalmanovsky, New York City, Anshe Chesed, Rabbi Barry Chesler, Solomon Check Day School, Long Island. It's great to see you guys. First we got to start out saying I got some very, very lovely reactions from our recent Parsha Talks. We have a really wonderful crew of viewers and listeners. So thank you at the beginning here. Thank you for watching and thank you for listening. And those of you, colleagues or other students of Torah who are sharing our insights, we are very, very honored that you are doing so. You don't have to attribute anything to us because let's face it, we're doing the best we can here ourselves.
And if we weren't getting paid all this money, we would still do it for free.
We enjoy it, and what we really enjoy most is disagreeing with each other, because that way we can illustrate all of the differences that we have and the common love that we share to the Torah. And of course, this week's Parsha gives us no shortage of material to disagree on because it's an amazing Parsha. It's probably one of the most difficult Parshas. It's a crisis Parsha. It's a Parsha that really goes to the core of the whole experience in the desert, the core of the whole Torah. Basically, so we're going to kind of gloss over the beginning, which is related to the Mishkan, some kind of footnotes to the Mishkan, of course, a census and
dealing. Well, we get a reprise next week when it's Shabbat Shalom.
Right.
And for those who daven from the traditional Siddur, they do Parashat Ki Tissa every morning.
So. Exactly, the text relating to the sacred influences and the sink and the basin, etc. And we have, of course, a reiteration of, we have the introduction of B'Tzalel, an extraordinary individual, and the reiteration of Shabbat in the context of covenant, and the passage that we recite every Shabbat, V'shamru v'nei Yisrael ta Shabbat. So in so many ways this is important, but the crisis moment of the Parsha, and really the crisis of the whole event in the desert, is that the people see that Moses is just taking his time. Vayar ha'am ki voshesh Moshe laredet min ha'ar. This is chapter 32, verse 1. The people see that Moses is tarrying. He is late, which ought to teach everyone never be late, because if you're late, the people will get restless. It's lots of interesting lessons here. But what do the people do here? Rabbi Barry Chesler, what happens?
Holy cow. They come to Aaron and they say, we need you to make us a god because our leader is gone. And I think in my version, they need to see God. That it's not an accident that the first word of the chapter is Vayar. That the people are seeing and they don't like what they see because Moses has not reappeared. Okay. And I've said this before, but I think that it's worth pointing out that the people's connection to God, Sinai aside for a moment, is mediated through Moshe.
So and Moshe is gone.
And now Moshe is God. And who knows if he's coming back? And I don't think they're saying we need a new God. They're not throwing out the God of Sinai, but they need to be able to see him because people need to see what's going on.
So this goes to really one of the core questions, which is, what's the deal? Why is idolatry such an issue? Why is it so attractive? What does it seem to respond to in a human being? Why do they need to see it? And of course, we think that we're so sophisticated that we don't have any of these inclinations. But if you just scratch the surface here, we could probably identify idolatry in many places in our own midst, in our own culture. Barry.
I think that idolatry is sensual. It's physical. And the invisible God is not a physical God. It is perhaps an intellectual or a spiritual God. And people want to tap into what they can sense. And it's not an accident that some forms of idolatry are wrapped up with sexual activity, which is also very sensual and can be dangerous if the focus is only on the senses.
Would you include music and dance and other forms of tactile engagement?
I think so. I mean, music is interesting because it's something that we hear, and that's how we mediate God in the world, right? The Israelite God is the God who speaks so that we may hear. Dance is a little bit different. It has no formal language, shall we say, but it is visual. You can't really imagine a dance.
So I
And
would say slightly different. That these two forms really tap into the emotion. Idolatry unleashes a kind of emotional outlet or outpouring, and focuses it on a visual object. And I think, we've talked many times about the power of the visual and how uh, the Torah and Judaism, by extension, really wants to veer us away from the visual precisely because of the damage that it could do. You see something and you fix your mind on it, and there's no room for diversity of opinion or ideas with that.
You know that there's one of the things that's interesting about this, and we can talk about, you know, do they want another God? Do they want, just something that would represent the true God? This is, they want a false God or represent the true God? Is the calf somehow in place of Moshe? But Moshe himself, Moshe is the greatest leader. Moshe is the greatest, person who has the experience of the divine. At the end of this parasha, well, not the end with a different kind of visual image with the glowing skin. But when Moses is up on the mountain trying to reconcile with God, and we get the 13 midot, what does Moses say? Hareini na et kivodecha, show me your presence. Moses can be seen to have, I think, the analogous reaction to the people, which is, I've had it with this invisibility thing, and you have to be a little bit more present. Hareini na et kivodecha, hodieni na et derachecha, show me your ways, teach me your ways. Teach me, it doesn't say visual. And then it says, Hareini na kvodecha, or the other way around, actually. Show me your glory. And God says famously, I will walk past you, Vera'ita et achorai, you'll see my back, ufanai lo yera'u, but you can't, my face will not appear. Lo tuchal lirot et panai ki lo yirani ha'adam v'chai, you cannot see my face, for no one can see my face and live. So God is seen in that, God is portrayed in that passage as giving Moses a visual experience, not a non-visual experience, but just a kind of a small one, my back. The midrash is that God showed Moshe the tefillin not on the back of God's head.
did he clarify whether it was Ashkenazic or Sephardic?
not the full dose, because what's interesting to me is that Moses also has, if it is a failing that the people have, that we need something visual, Moses has the same failing, and he probably handles it a little bit better, but he gets the same message, which is, I'm sorry, you're going to have to live this religious life without visual, without eyewitnessing.
So wait. I keep going back to a statement that Rabbi Israel Silverman, alav shalom, many summers at camp with him, he used to say something I'll try and imitate. He says, "There's the genius of an invisible God is that everybody can perceive God in their own way. And there's something remarkable about that the denial of a visual access to something enables every one of us to perceive of God. And I would even go so far as to say that the vision that Moses has there is a vision. It's the most blazing vision that this individual or any individual could have had, but it still remains in the realm of vision that is communicated to us by words, which we need to interpret. And so,
but it's even more brilliant than that, because I think, following up on Jeremy's comment about the tefillin, what is tefillin? Tefillin is a sign. So what Moses is actually seeing is a sign of God.
and not God himself.
And not God himself, because the vision there, I think, is a little too difficult. But on the other hand, we have to come back to the end of the Parsha, where Moses has this radiating experience of God, so much so that he must wear a mask when he appears before the people, because they can no longer see him. And that may be the true tragedy of the golden calf, is that Moses is effectively removed from the people as well, not just God.
Yeah.
And on the other hand, when Moses is in the tent, in communion and communication with God, he takes off the mask because they're panim el panim.
So I take a different view of that. I think that it's I guess, I'm so connected to the radioactive image, that coming close to God, he comes to the source, the core of the nuclear reactor, and he becomes radioactive himself in a quite a literal way. He glows, okay, and by having that experience, with God, he himself, it's now part of it, and it begins to manifest the vision that he had at the burning bush, which was that you can have God and not be consumed, and that Moses becomes kind of the living candle. It's a beautiful midrashic image that Moses is the chief of the prophets who ignites and sparks every other prophet in history, and the light basically goes from him to what the veil then signifies is the protection, it's fear, and also honor. I mean, I don't want to get too carried away with veiling the bride, but why do we veil the bride? And
well, they're often radioactive. I think we could agree on that.
But I actually think that maybe this strengthens the idea from Nachmanides that what they want is, with the golden calf, is they want Moshe Acher. They want a replacement Moshe, and maybe at the end Moshe does become the calf, because the calf is sparkly, and Moses, in the end of the day, ends up gleaming like gold. So if maybe he's the bush. By the way, the bush also, back at the beginning of this whole, Exodus experience narrative, Moses is afraid to look. He hides his face because he's afraid to look. He is seeing more than he can handle, and the people want they can handle even less, and they want. And then in the end of the day, Moses is gleaming, perhaps like the burning bush, or perhaps like the calf itself, and they can't look anymore because it's just too frightening. It's just too much radiance.
Can we do a frame by frame analysis of what Moses does here? Because the story is so just filled with so much of possibility or of interpretation. So God, the people, they succeed in convincing Aaron to make the calf, okay? And then God says to Moses, Lech red kishichet amcha, right? Precious, right? Go down because your people have acted basely. You brought them out. Saro maher min haderech. They have veered from the path. And so, and God says to Moses, I see that this people is stiff-necked. Hanichali, verse 10, let me be. I will destroy them. Achalem, which is ukal, I will let I will eat them up, basically. I will destroy them. And I'll make you a great people. Moses intercedes and convinces God not to do that. Shuv mecharon apecha v'inachem ara le'amecha, and take back your anger. And God relents. Great moment of leadership.
For whom? This is God as the brilliant political theorist. He says these things before Moses says them. In other words, God says, let me destroy this people. To prevent Moses was saying, God, I cannot take this people. Let's start again. And Moses is forced in the role of having to defend the people.
So you're saying that God is the political theorist or Moses?
Yeah, no, God. This is brilliant diplomacy. You get the other person to, you say what the other person wanted to say so they can no longer say it.
I look at Moses and think, what a great moment. He's like the, stop, God. He's like referee here, pushing back. I'm pushing back on you. Zechor, remember what you said. Right? Is that where he says, Zechor l'Avraham li'Yitzchak li'Yisrael avadecha.
Well,
Remember
that's
your
harkens
covenant.
back to the burning bush.
Yes. So he's putting himself in between. And so I think, I would say that Moses, this is a brilliant moment of his leadership because he knows, he's aware that he's indispensable to God. There's some greatness in him. There's
no question that there's greatness here, but I think that we have to be careful that in our zeal, as it were, to promote Moses and Moses as a leader, that we take away too much from God. Because in your reading, what kind of God are we left with? I'm left with kind of a nebbish.
Exactly.
These people, well, but I don't think that, properly speaking, we can have a religion where God is a nebbish.
I think we can certainly have a religion where God is a nebbish because sorry.
No. Because when God says, leave me alone and I'm going to kill him, that's like, hold me back, don't let me go. And so I maybe they can both be great, but Lama Yomru Mitzrayim, what do the Egyptians say? That's just always such a bad, it's amazing to me how often God falls for that one. That's just a terrible argument.
But okay, so it appeals to God's vanity. All right. So yes, am I minimizing it? No, I'm saying that there's a reading here that God is completely disappointed and God is devastated by this. And God has, so I want to take the Rahmanis. I don't want to think of God as a nebbish. I want to think of God as earnest and trying so hard. I want to break through to humanity and I want to give them I want to give them the principles. I want to give them the precepts. I want to give them the way to live, and they just don't want to have anything to do with me. They need things. They're not ready. And I can't take it anymore.
Okay,
They're not ready is a profound religious reality. And I think that that's a little bit bigger than God's vanity or whatever. And as you know, we talked about this last week or 2 weeks ago. I'm really attracted to the Perush that Rashi has with other midrashim, that the story is told out of order, and that the Mishkan is actually supposed to come after the golden calf. That the golden calf is the realization, or triggers the realization on God's part, that if there's going to be this connection, there needs to be something that they can build, something that may be in fact visual and beautiful in its own way. I'm attracted to the other position too, that the Mishkan has an independent value, not just as a reparation for the calf.
It's kind of intellectual bigamy.
But if the people aren't ready, then I think that sounds to me like the religious reality that we all go through, which is, that's what it means to actually believe in God, that there is something that surpasses the world, that the world cannot bear. And so to be a mortal in the presence of something immortal, and to be finite in the presence of something finite, it's going to be hard, and there's going to be rough spots.
The text wants us to identify the moment that God changes his mind. Look at, you gotta appreciate the irony here. God wants to destroy the people. It's almost, there's a Noah-Hyde kind of echo here, that God wants to destroy the people and recreate the people with a righteous central character named Moses. And Moses says, knock it off, basically. You can't do that. And God quickly changes his mind. And this is the same word that is used in the Noah story, which is God regrets. God regrets having made. And here, God regrets having thought these things. There's the irony is unbearable. Okay, so let's go to the next scene. The next scene is that Moses comes down, and I'm going to put the debatable proposition on the table, which is, this is Moses' finest hour. Moses comes down. He gets the report from Joshua. Joshua says that it's like kol milchama b'machaneh, it's breaking out. There's like it's a hockey match down there, right?
Oh, it's a hockey match. 5 for fighting.
I know we're going to get the text here on this, okay? Right? And Moses says, no, it's not. It's kolanot, okay? And then, Vayhi ka'asher karav el hamach, he gets closer. Vayar et ha'egel, he sees the calf, umecholot, and the dancing. Vayicharaf Moshe, he becomes angry. Vayashlech mi'adav et haluchot, vayishaber otam tachat hahar. He sends forth the tablets and he breaks them at the base of the mountain. Discuss. Anger issues, great leadership, or take us into the midrashim. I mean, you know, I find one of your students and says, Rabbi Chesler, what happened there? What did he do? Why did he do it?
Well, I think the immediate reaction is anger management issues. I think that, we have to look at the scene literally. Moses has been to the mountaintop and now he's come down to earth and he finds earth. He's no longer on the mountaintop. And what he took from the mountain, which is, we might say, the living fire of God, which has carved out these luchot, they can't be in this world. There's too much God in those commandments, in those luchot, in
the tablets,
in those tablets, to stand in the world. And therefore, he might be angry at the people, but he's also angry that this God cannot endure in our world with people.
I kind of think of it as, the image of like, God, the challenger, it enters the atmosphere and it breaks up and it's the analogy is a bit of a stretch, but you're right. He's coming down from on high. He has this radioactive thing. It can't sustain itself in the world. It's too hot. It's too nuclearized, and it breaks. But then there's the added piece of the humanity, his humanity here, which is.
So I think that it's a cautionary tale because the people want God in the world. That's why they have this golden calf made. And I think that sometimes when we read the story, what I picked up on when you were reading Elliot is that what Moses reacts is not so much to the egel, but to the dancing.
To the dancing.
Yeah. That's a sign that goes with the kolot that he heard, that the people have been carried away.
Yes. Yeah.
By their experience.
Very much, very much. It's unbridled.
And he can't abide that.
Dude abide.
So it's mixed dancing.
Mixed dancing. Well, you
mixed
never
dancing.
know what happens. Maybe.
When it breaks out, it's not good.
Okay. So there's so many wonderful midrashim about this, which testify to the fact that poetry, anything that's poetry, doesn't just mean one thing. It's not like we're trying to ascertain the facts here, and once we ascertain the facts, we've got it resolved. It's poetic, and the midrashim go in both directions. Like there's one that relates to Barry's approach from a moment ago that said that he didn't. It's not that he threw the tablets down; it's that he dropped them. Moses is an 80-year-old guy. He's a little more than 80 now, and he's hewing these two massive, rocks, carrying them down a mountain. Come on, man, how did he do that? Well, he did that because the tablets were themselves filled with spirituality, but once the people worshiped the calf, the spirituality left the tablets. They became nothing but rock. They were no longer the point of connection between heaven and earth, and he couldn't hold them anymore, and they fell. Another way to look at it, and that just really captures, I think, the approach that you had, is it was just the people's actions banished the spirituality from the moment. Alternatively, there's a passage in the Talmud in which God says, well done, luchot harishonot asher shibarta, yasher koach sheshibarta, well done that you did it. And God was impressed with Moses' incredibly demonstrative gesture of rebuke, and like there's, as you just read, that he broke the tablets tachat hahar. Tachat hahar does, of course, literally mean underneath, that is at the foot of the mountain. But tachat, like in the phrase ayin tachat ayin, an eye for an eye can mean instead of. So you have this image. Sinai, the mountain was quaking, and the people Nasaf and Ishma, and it was all so close. And then they turn bad, and they're worshiping the calf, and you get the feeling like the mountain was going to blow, the mountain was going to explode itself, and Moses does something cathartic and necessary to divert. And this is the Yasher Koach, this is the well done Moses' finest hour. The world was going to explode because of their faithlessness, and Moses sort of redirected the fury into one small act. And so that was maybe a brilliant act of breaking the crisis. And then finally, there's a whole nother way of approaching, which is I think it's also true in this poetic way, which is that when Moses later on in the book of Numbers is going to get punished by not being entered in the land because he quote unquote hit the rock, I think that's like a subtle way of referring to this story, that Moses's punishment is actually for destroying the rock, destroying this rock,
destroying the tablets,
destroying the stone tablets, exactly, and that he does have an anger problem and didn't treat these tablets with the appropriate kind of reverence. So I think all these things are possible. Maybe they all have a piece of the truth.
I want to give Moses the gold leadership award here, okay, and say that this is a great moment which he staves off God's anger and he expresses his own anger because he has remarkable self-understanding at this moment, that he knows that he's indispensable. And I want to just kind of prove that. But we have the moment where he orders the Levites, problematic in its own way. But the very next moment is saying, "Look, I gotta. There's so much potential for destruction here. I want God to forgive you." Vayashav Moshe al Adonai vayomar. He turns to God and says, it's chapter 32-31, Ana chata ha'am hazeh chata gedola. The people have made a great sin and they made a god of gold. Ata im tisa chatatam. You have to lift up their sin. In other words, you have to forgive them. V'im ayin, I think this is the best line in the whole parsha. Mecheni na misifrecha asher katavta. Erase me from the book. Take me out of the book. This is the greatest moment. He's saying, if you do not do this, if you do not forgive them, I'm not in it.
Well, but we know he can't do that because then we would end up with a dangling preposition. It would be the 5 books of, and that can't happen. But I want to come back to something that Jeremy said, because this really gets to the way I think that we read the Torah. So Jeremy's point is that the people were not ready. And the question that it raises is, does that mean that the golden calf wouldn't have happened a few weeks or a few months later because the people would have had an opportunity to mature? In which case there's this great tragedy. It's like bad timing. The car darted out in front of you, as it were, and hit you. You weren't planning on that happening. Or do we read it kind of existentially, that in the life of people, us as individuals, as the descendants of Bnei Israel, we have these moments that are fraught with danger that we don't always act properly, and we never get past them.
Yeah, well, we know how the book ends. It takes them 40 years to get to. I mean, they're going to get another set of tablets, okay, and they're going to get a whole, another 3 books of legislation. They're going to get a lot of laws and rules, but it's going to take 40 years and a new generation to shake off.
But ironically, the 40 years isn't going to come from this; it's going to come from the spies.
So okay, fine. So and that it
unless you read that also similarly to the way you read the hitting of the rock, Jeremy.
Well, I like what you said about just the paradigmatic approach to human spirituality. Like we were talking about before we started recording, the Kabbalistic mythology about the vessels to contain the light of the world shattering, and that there's a kind of parallel to this, the Luchot shattering, and I think that both of those stories, can be read certainly the story of Moses can be read as like something that happened to a people at a given moment in time. And if it had happened at a different moment in time, the reactions might have been different. But I think at the sort of deep DNA level of human spirituality, they're about the, what it means to be a finite person confronting an infinite task. Like, they're finite. They're always going to be a mixture of spiritual and physical. They're always going to be both, noble and stupid, and no one is ever ready all the time.
So I think uh, I- we could go in so many directions. I want to propose an idea that the bottom line here is that there's forgiveness, that God does forgive them. Of course, it takes tremendous intercession on Moses' behalf. And Moses, we see in the chapter in the Parsha, I mean, one of the most phenomenal moments in the entire Torah is in this Parsha, where Moses asks God. We mentioned it before. Show me your face. Show me. I want to see you. There's an urgency about it, and what is disclosed to Moses is God's forgiving nature. That God is compassionate to the thousandth generation. That God, and that I think in the arc of the story, they're given a second chance. I can't tell you how it's like, even to say that, you get chills saying that. It's like you people, you stiff-necked people, you difficult people, you 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 worshipped a calf. Okay, I'm going to give you a second chance. I mean, that's what it's about, and we've built a whole religion based on this moment. Yom Kippur is really the anniversary of this moment. It's saying we're going to summon this moment in as the archetype of your relationship. That it's always going to be where you can make some really grave errors, and you
So
can
just explain it to the people a little bit better, which is that the the account is that Moses comes down with the first tablet, sees the golden calf, and breaks the first tablets on the 17th of Tammuz, goes back up for another 40 days, and comes back down with the second set of tablets on Yom Kippur.
10 Tishrei.
Yeah.
And that this
So,
becomes the paradigm of forgiveness.
But I want to give
Yeah.
I want to give some of course this is absolutely correct. Moses goes up and has this experience with God, and God says, the grammar is complicated. There are different interpretations about who the subjects are. God passes before Moses, and God says, or Moses says, Adonai, Adonai, El Rachum V'Chanun, the gracious and forgiving God. But let's give some super gigantic religion of repentance and forgiveness props to the rabbis, because the actual verse is Adonai, Adonai, El Rachum V'Chanun, the merciful, gracious God, Erech Hapayim, patient, Rav Chesed Ve'emet, abounding in faithfulness and kindness, Notzer Chesed La'alafim, keeping kindness for 1,000 generations, Nosei Avon V'Pesha V'Chata'ah, forgiving all kinds of bad behavior, V'Nakeh Lo Yinakeh, Poker Avon Avot Abanim V'Abnei Banim Ashilashim V'Ariveim. But listen, I'm not going to forgive you totally. I'm going to punish you first for 3 generations, 1,000 generations of kindness, but 3 generations of punishment. And the Torah actually says, okay, basically punishment is kicked down the road a little bit, but by the way, there has to be punishment. By no means will I fail to punish. And we, Jewish tradition, or the rabbis, or whoever, just stuck a period in the middle of the sentence that changed it from, I will not, that I will certainly punish, to I totally forgive. It changed. It was like a complete and total changing of the meaning of the verse, to create the thoroughgoing repentance, or the thoroughgoing forgiveness. And I just feel that I feel like that is, in some sense, the consummate act of midrash, which is to say that we have a Torah, we inherit a Torah, and the readers of the Torah extract the teaching of kindness.
Well, the
Torah is not always so kind.
From the Nevi'im also requote it and also leave pieces of that text off of it. And so the rabbis are simply extending that. Go ahead, Barry.
So the question is, so Elliot, in your reading, then this is one of Moses's great moments in defense of the people. He is the great advocate. Absolutely. And we've acknowledged that God is the great forgiver.
Yes.
The question that's left then is, Bnei Yisrael the great repenter? Is there any sign of repentance in the story on behalf of Bnei Yisrael?
So what I
Or
would say
is this really the chesed la'alafim, that this is God's overabundant graciousness to the unrepentant sinner?
okay, so we don't get evidence, full evidence that they are repentant, but I want to say they have potential. This is the people that always has potential and will always have a mechanism and instrumentality of doing that through what later becomes teshuvah, but of course in biblical religion is through the whole mechanism of kapara in the Beit HaMikdash and the sanctuary, etc. In other words, the people, while they're not perfect at all. They're still rotten, and they still do rotten things later on. They always have potential, and I think I mean that's such a refreshing way of seeing it, because what are we if not people filled with potential, right? We're not horrible people. We always have the potential to improve ourselves, and I think this is the message that comes out of this parsha. You get a chance. You get a second chance. Okay.
Well, it's an uplifting message,
Yeah, it's a very uplifting message.
right? So it gives us a chance to, in the poetic imagery, to go up the mountain with Moses.
Absolutely. And that's the where you have to get it. You have to make the effort. Go up the mountain. Everybody has to try.
You have to hew the second set of tablets. There's always going to be the case that as long as you live in this world, the tablets are broken. So now you have to hew the second set of tablets.
Cool.
And carry them up the mountain and write them again.
You have to make the effort, and that's where we have to stop. We're stopping as we walk up the mountain. We're going up the mountain with the two tablets, and we're holding it with the potential that God's light will engrave themselves on the tablets of our heart. With that, I want to thank you all for watching us and listening to us. We so appreciate your time with us. And for my good friends, Shabbat Shalom, Rabbi Jeremy.
Shabbat Shalom.
See you all next week in the next edition of Parsha Talk.